Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, my guest is Greg Martin. He is part of the founding team at Origin Merchant Partners, a boutique investment bank focused on mergers and acquisitions and working with entrepreneurs of all kinds every day. He previously founded and operated a restaurant, catering, and food e-commerce business, which he has since exited. In addition, he is the host of the Lifetime at Work podcast, all about exploring the careers of different people with the pains, struggles, and the fulfillment they can bring. Greg, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
All right, fantastic. So you are connected to, or were connected to, a family business. And so let's talk about that story first, because I know that usually it's a business that someone's involved in that leads them to get involved in some kind of investment banking.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, so the family business is sort of what's been around my life ever since I've been born in the 70s. My grandfather started a screen printing business. They predominantly would screen print on plastic bottles and a lot of cosmetic type stuff, and operated a factory as such. And it was probably, I'm assuming in the 70s, a more common thing to have happen. And I think over the years, labeling has really taken off, and a lot of it has become a lot more vertically integrated, where, you're a big cosmetic brand, you're doing a lot of that stuff in-house. But what's happened over the years is so today my dad owns and runs the business. He took over from my now late grandfather, and my brother is actively involved in the business and sort of in this transitionary phase of probably taking over in the next, I don't know, however many years. And so, and then meanwhile, the business itself it's still, what's happened is that, yes, the whole probably sector has shrunk, but they have survived. They've got a really unique and kind of angle on it, where they've just become the de facto, player in this space for sort of custom bottle decorating. And so they're based in the Toronto area, but then are, shipping across all the northern US and throughout Canada and all that. So, it's been around anyways since as long as I can remember.
And I mean, I know the industry because one of my early assignments was as a consultant going into a company like that. And I couldn't believe that some guy made labels that were basically smaller than the size of my finger that had to go on cosmetics, toothpaste, pharmaceutical products. And what a struggle it was for this person to keep that business going. So a lot of old school style, screen printing type of apparatus, and screen printing, a lot of it's been digitized, and the big players have come out and sort of knocked out all the small players. This is a common problem that you see probably in your business today as an investment banker, where technology or just social trends or regulatory changes has a huge impact on businesses. And so one of the questions I think I'd like to queue up for you is, how do we get the people that we're speaking to, our clients or potential clients, to make it a regular part of their business to look outside of their business at the industry at large and the political and the economic and the social and the technological changes that are afoot, and get them to like get out, talk to people at trade shows, get out into the industry and the world at large and see what's going on so they can sort of look into the crystal ball and see what might their business need to look like in 10 or 20 years. How do you have those conversations with people? What are the things that you tell them?
Yeah, can be a hard thing to do when you've got a really old business, right? It tends to be what you do when you have a new one, right? You're starting a new business, you're all over it, you're eager, and over time you lose that, right? You get a sense of complacency, and you understand the business well, and you don't necessarily kind of get out there quite as much. But I do think though that I was an entrepreneur again, separate business, and what I did find though was that there's an interesting sense, or I had anyways, of loneliness, of not necessarily being able to relate to enough people. I had business partners, but it really, it wasn't quite the same. And I really ultimately, I was in the food business, but valued going and talking to others. And, just by saying, hey, I founded this type of business, or I'm the owner of such and such a business. You get this connection right off the bat. And I think that's what you're looking for. Like, I don't know that you're necessarily going to, go to a conference and necessarily have an epiphany, though maybe you will, but it's kind of that knowledge. And I think that network, like a little bit of a network of just understanding what others are doing. They want to show you that they're smart. They want to, they're going to have a discussion. They're going to start talking about the trends and what's going on. And I think that, a conference, or just even just emailing, like it can be a competitor or someone in a different part of the world that is doing something similar to you, can actually be, really fascinating, interesting, just from hey, I'm getting a friend and a good relationship, and from like an actual just, hey, I can relate to this person because they're in my shoes as well.
Yeah. I mean, CEO peer groups, do a lot to help people get that start. But if your group is limited to 16 people, it might not be a large enough group, and they may be
different industry, right? They may be in a different industry,
so they don't know,
which
right.
So you don't have quite the same conversation. It's a good conversation. It's just a different one.
I think you have to get out into your industry association to some degree, and you have to be learning. You have to be reading the papers, finding out what's going on, talking to colleagues, talking to peers, talking to your employees. It's a lot of that. I mean, so is that what led you to leave, or did you never join the screen printing business that your family had? What was your
No, I never really joined. I mean, I worked there in high school as kind of my first job, and one that was just, I'm cheap labor. And kind of learned the business a little bit there just by being a part of it. But no, I never worked within it.
Was the expectation that you would join it, or was this just, no, Greg, if you need to make some money during the summer here, you can do this?
Make some money.
More the latter. Gotcha. Yeah. So, a lot of family businesses have a strong patriarchal, or matriarchal structure. Then the expectation would be, oh no, this isn't like an option, Greg. Like, you join the family business, everyone joins the family business. So there was none of that going on in your family, I take it.
No. Certainly my parents were open. They've always been very much like, do what you want to do, in terms of their mentality, I think. And interestingly, my grandfather who started it, my grandmother, they had 3 kids. And so only one, my dad, went into the family business. The other 2 didn't. And so, there's precedent again for that. It's not to say that, everyone goes into this business. It's an option there. It was, something there that a lot of family would be to support. A lot of my other family members have worked there. So I have a cousin who's worked in the business pretty much her whole professional career, and various other family members who have sort of been in and out of the business over the years too. So,
yeah. So I'm just kind of thinking in my head, like, what's the scorecard here, the pluses and minuses of going into family business? Certainly job security has got to be a plus for those people. The minus to that, though, is maybe a lack of risk taking, a lack of being entrepreneurial. might go along with that is if it's job security that they were seeking. What are some other things that come to your mind? Just doing a little, popcorn thinking here.
Yeah, so it's interesting because my brother and I are probably both going through that consideration for ourselves on almost not even a continuous basis, but we that comes up, right? He went into the business and I didn't, and we both have those questions, I think. So for him, I think he, putting words into his mouth, he would have, times where he would say, should I just go and do something different, learn a completely different skill, get out there, take some risks, again, just kind of, I don't know, travel the world. I don't know, just do something different and get a different experience, because this one is just very much in our family. And then, I would grapple with that on the flip side of, hey, I went off and started my own business and it wasn't successful. And why wouldn't I have spent time if I had, business acumen, and they're in quotes, to go and provide that to the business and see what we could do. And you do grapple with those things. So I do see those as the pros and cons. And I think for, some of the other family members that have joined or not joined, I think, part of it is just a sense of familiarity, like and trust. I think you want to go someplace and work someplace and be part of an organization where you feel like family, or you feel like that you are part and you belong and that you have influence and that you are, making a difference. And so obviously, if you actually literally are family, it sometimes can help with that.
Yeah. So you were, how young were you when you started your food business?
Early 30s.
Early 30s.
No. So I had worked in investment banking. That's what I had done when I graduated university. And it was interesting for me because I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Again, my come in my family, it had been a thing, and I had thought about it, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, and really felt like I was an idiot and didn't know anything. And so I had to get out in the real world and work for someone and learn. But investment banking is tough. It's, I don't know, 80, 100-hour weeks very often, sometimes more. And so I said, hey, I'll do this for 2 or 3 years and then go find, the next thing. And I hit the 10-year mark in investment banking and said, what am I doing here? Is this my life forever? And so I think within that, I then, began putting my sights on kind of starting a different business that would be something, again, from scratch that would be in a totally different industry. So
did you have the opportunity where someone came to you and was running a business and you thought, maybe I'll join their business and this would be, that way I can get something that's already got a jump start? Or
no, it came from talking to friends who had similar perspectives, viewpoints, and we said, oh, well, we've got a few different skill sets. One was a chef, the other was a marketing person. I was more finance and ops focused, and we said, hey, could we do this? And part of it wasn't really like, hey, let's go make billions of dollars. It was very much a let's go learn about the food industry because we're excited about it, and worst case scenario, we learn a bunch and we aren't successful, but at least we've sort of scratched the itch.
That's great. What I believe that people learn so much from their failures, and maybe more from their failures than their successes. What are maybe 1 or 2 key takeaways that you had from your business?
Yeah, it was incredible what I learned just because of all the hats, I would say. I hadn't really been this. It's crazy that you have to be this. You have to make all the strategic as the owner of the business, the person who's sort of starting it. You've got to, make all the strategic decisions. You've got to be a leader. You've got to, understand the financials. You've got to, I was in charge of marketing. Like, you're just doing all these different things and seeing how they fit in. And so, I think just the inner workings of a business were probably the biggest things that I just never appreciated, because in jobs I'd had in past, it was a very narrow, hey, do this and you can wrap your head around it. And so, in being in business by myself, where I was effectively, an entrepreneur, it just, pure white space of just whatever you wanted to do. And there was no one there saying this is a good idea or not. And so, those were some of the things. But I just had never done any of that stuff. Like, I had never done marketing. I had never done, I never really led a team. So a lot of these things were what I kind of had to learn just kind of by trial by fire. And yeah. So, it's hard to even, I don't know. There's just so much there.
Gotcha. So, you learned a lot from your experience in this path that you followed in your journey, and you have a podcast somewhat related to the other people's journeys and helping them when is it time to make a big change, like starting a business or finding a new job? What, what are some of the signs that you see that you help and tell people like this might be the time? Scratch that itch.
Yeah, I mean, reflecting on it, for me, it was something that I just couldn't get out of my head. Like you
Hmm.
just, at a certain point, you just convince yourself. Like it kind of just takes over. And I think it's somewhere around there. And for me, it was more of I didn't know, I knew I wanted to, I had to at some point start a business. There was no way I was going to go through life and not having done it. So
Hmm.
just by going out and doing it, I think I got a lot out of it. So that's what I tell people. I honestly say like it's incredibly terrifying to do it, say right out of school where you haven't had experience. I think it to me makes a lot of sense where you have effectively had someone pay you to learn about an industry and get into it and then go and start a business in that industry makes just all the more sense from a pragmatic perspective. So that's usually the advice that I give people is yes, if you want to be an entrepreneur, then just get into it. You don't have to be 100% entrepreneur, i.e. starting something from scratch to get into that world. You can invest, you can advise, you can go work for one. There's lots of things you can do to get a glimpse of it. And if it's an industry that you really like, then yes, same thing, go work in it. And over time, it'll become clear. And yeah, I mean, I think you kind of got to do it, but then I think you really have to think about what happens if it doesn't go according to plan, and what do I do if yeah, again, if I run out of money, if my main thesis is not true, because it's no not as easy as just quitting a job.
Yeah. Are there some tips that you give people for identifying what's the right fit for them, in addition to what you just already shared?
From like what to do with that sort of
Y-
entrepreneurial job.
Yeah, like, I mean, like you describe yourself to me as a food guy at heart. And so, um, I imagine, whether it's, running a restaurant, catering, food e-commerce, or any clients that are coming to you that are food related, probably kind of get you a little more excited than maybe other businesses because that's a passion for you. How do
Yeah.
other people who aren't so clear maybe about what their passion might be figure out what's the right fit for them?
Yeah, it's funny because I typically don't, or I give contrary advice to young people.
Okay.
Typically, I tell them that because say you like sports and you're a whatever 16-year-old and all you do is you love sports and you say okay, but you're not, maybe you're not you don't have professional athlete in the genes here.
Right.
It's very hard to say I'm only going to go find a job in sports and go and do that, right? Like I have a passion for this and whatever. And I'd argue that over like that you shouldn't, that it shouldn't just be that you can always watch sports, like that you don't have to work in it to be passionate and to love it, that there are a lot of other things that we probably don't consider when we're getting into a job that are really important things. And unfortunately, like I'm not a soft skills type person in the sense like I'm a finance person. I believe in the tangible, but
Hmm.
I honestly, with the job, I'm thinking like, how often are you speaking? What sort of relationships do you need to have and get? Communication. What are you problem solving? Are you what are the elements of the job that you're doing? Much more from a soft skills perspective that you're getting to do. And frankly, like those are the things that become super important within a job. And so I kind of end up giving that advice. And I would say the same then if you're starting a business, is that it certainly should be something that you are very familiar with. It's
Right.
important to really understand what the industry is, before you decide to take the leap to really get it. And a lot of times it means working in it in some way or another. But it doesn't need to be something that you have done forever, or it can be something brand new that you are effectively learning, and but though applying some of the skills that you have from other things to it. And I think that's the way to think about it, that as abstract as that all
Yeah,
is.
yeah. No,
So
I think so. Okay, I'm going to transition a little bit to now talking more about your current work as an investment banker. And and maybe the question is framed up for someone who's thinking about going to an investment banker. I mean, should they be looking for someone who already has a lot of familiarity with their industry? And the flip side of that is, as an investment banker, do you seek out more food industry type companies to do M&A work with because that's where you feel like you can add the most value and hit the ground running? I mean, so it's two sides of the same coin from the customer's perspective or
yep.
the seller's perspective and you as a marketer of your services perspective.
Yeah, totally. So, in Canada, we tend to be a bit more broad. In the US, there's a lot of very, very specifically focused investment banks out there. But
Right.
what we do in Canada, like our firm, we typically are, the majority of what we're doing are sell side transactions
Sure.
for founders.
Hmm.
And that's probably, 70% of what we do. And in a lot of cases, the business would be, call it if you talk about the value of the business or the enterprise value, anywhere from 2025 up to 300-400 million,
Hmm.
and that's kind of the area that we play in. And certainly having a familiarity of the industry is important, but mostly because, well, mostly for two reasons. One, when your investment banker goes and tries to pitch the story to someone who's going to buy it, they need to know what they're talking about a little bit, and be able to communicate the story properly, and
Hmm.
the benefits of your business. But then two is just knowing who to go to, right? There's a lot of different buyers out there. And if you have just been, you focus exclusively on the industrial sector, and then all of a sudden now you have a high technology client with totally different set of buyers, you may not have relationships there, and be able to find them. So those are probably the two kind of key areas to diligence and figure out when you're doing it. But yes, I do focus a lot on the food sector
Yeah,
in my business. So
sure. I bet you would. I would if I were you. And by the way, it's great eating along the way. Well, so
absolutely.
you'll never miss a meal. It's like working in the restaurant industry. Um, so you're based out of Toronto. I'm just noticing the colors of your of the one sheet that you sent me. They're remarkably similar to the colors of John Warlow's Value Builder organization, which is also based out of Toronto. I'm assuming or guessing you're familiar with him and his company.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And the podcast is
it,
great. So
exactly. Um, so John has some ideas and notions about whether you're like being pushed out of the business or you're being pulled towards something else. And his concept is that when you're selling a business, you don't really ever want to be feeling like you're being pushed out of something. You want to feel like you're being pulled towards something else. And it seems that the person who's being pulled towards something else maybe has a better ability to drive more value in their business through the exit, which is really important. I'm sure you tell your clients do not like when you come to me, this is not a time to check out and start to like just coast. This is a time to continue driving full throttle as we go through this process of exiting the
right.
business. Is that your experience too? This push pull notion that makes sense?
It does. Now there are a ton of reasons why companies sell, and so or founders want to sell, and sometimes it is just because I think in a lot of cases it is that it's eras and stages of a business, and that can happen. It's just by nature, right? Like that's just, as people have that as well, right? You go
Right.
through different stages in life as
Sure.
businesses do, and at a certain point, it just doesn't make any sense anymore for that founder to be the one, or they don't want to be ultimately, right? Or and that group, and so they need to exit. There is though, it's interesting because I deal with businesses and companies and people who are in this situation all the time. There are some that are totally fine with they're just I'm going to sell here, but I'm indifferent whether we actually sell. Like they're sort of like I could keep running this. That is
Oh,
rare. That
right.
is
That's
rare.
rare. And that makes it harder for you to
Equally,
sell it too, because if you
it
get
is.
you could get a really good offer and they'd be like, nah,
I
it's
changed their
okay.
mind. Yeah. In most cases, they've checked out and they've already checked out. And they don't even, they're just like, can you just please get this off my hands because I've whatever. And it's very common. And it's not great. It isn't a great situation to be in. You really do, and you really should. If again, it's hard, this is very hard advice to actually take and super
Right.
easy to give, but you
Right.
really should start early when you're like I'm winding down, but I'm because there are earnouts where you sell, but then you need to be involved in the business going forward, and where there's a ton of value for you to be there. You may sell to a group that wants your expertise. Doesn't need to be 40-60 hours a week, but it might be a little bit. And so
Right.
gearing yourself up for that early is just super important. But mentally, it is challenging.
And do most sellers, because I went recently through I helped a client sell his business and he had an earnout. He participated. It went down from 40 to 30 to 20 hours a week type thing. But man, he couldn't wait to get out. Like he was so done. He just wanted to wash his hands of the business. Is this a pretty common thing that you see? And, sellers just sort of like, just like help.
Yeah, it is.
You want to,
It's decently common. I just find sort of reading the body language and just go. You do go through quite an experience with someone selling their business.
oh,
That
sure.
they are just they're just done. Like they're done with it. There's a reason why they're doing it. There's a passion that they once had, which isn't there anymore.
Right.
And I think it's actually just something that is genuinely hard to keep up for years and years and years. The lifetime of a business, especially a successful one, you know, is it 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 50 years? Like it's a long time. And so, to keep passion and to keep driving there is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm curious, in your experience, how much is globalization, AI, working from home, technology playing into people's decisions not to continue the business versus no, it's something more internal, like personal, and like it's just time, or it's just a mix. Is it just a mixed
It,
bag?
yeah, it's hard to. I do think that it isn't like that would just be one element
Right.
of the struggles. What I found, being involved in, especially in a business that was, ultimately a failed business, was that when you have problems as the founder, CEO, whatever, they just all come to you. And event you reach a certain point, especially when your business is going through, and it's all on you, right? Any challenge, you're no longer focused on the good. You are just, you're the principal dealing with all the trouble students. That's just who you are.
Hmm.
And it weighs on you, right? And those
Yeah.
things weigh on you as well, where you then
Yeah.
now have to think about all the things that aren't maybe right at your door, but might be soon. And it does, I think, just psychologically and just emotionally just really take a toll on people over time. And it's less so one specific thing that is coming to take all of our jobs. It's a lot more of just that large burden. And I think it really takes a certain mindset. You sort of think about, I don't know, I always think of, these golfers, Tiger Woods and things, who have these, coaches who are effectively psychologists that are just there to make
Hmm.
sure that they're in the right frame of
Right.
mind. And like, it
Right.
actually is important as business owner as well to kind of be there, because you can really go down these paths that aren't necessarily great. They're just not as fulfilling as it once was. And some of that drives you then to say, okay, I want out, I'm just going to sell. And that is, can be where you end up if you don't have the right frame in your head.
Do you have a standard conversation or a frequent conversation dialogue around the right reason to sell the business? Like these are the right reasons, these are the wrong reasons,
People don't
or
usually come to us for that advice. They're usually coming once they've made that decision,
they
honestly.
have. Okay.
It would be more of a friend. It'd be more someone that I would know more,
Gotcha.
personally, where they might bring that up. But in a lot of cases in my line of work, it's typically, you're hiring someone to help you. You're hiring an M&A advisor when you already know.
How do they choose you over someone else? Are they talking to multiple firms and getting multiple bids usually? I mean, what's that
That's common.
except? Mhm.
It's common to ask. A lot of times they ask people around them. It's the most common way to do it. You ask your accountant, your lawyer, your other business advisor, someone else you knew from whomever that sold their business. And so a lot of it is referral. We try to, as from a firm perspective, like in my business, I try to be out there a lot more, and with businesses, just trying to learn about them and help them before, well before they're ready to sell. And when you focus on a particular industry, you can do that, but it's hard to know all the businesses out there, and so you can you kind of have to be selective with that. But that is how you find it. Is a lot of times it's someone you trust who's giving you a referral.
So, as you know, this show is called the Disruptive Successor,
Yeah.
show, and it's based on my book, Disruptive Successor, and which is the concept is that there's a next generation leader who is going to have to disrupt the apple cart, whether it's technology or the product or the service or some of the longtime employees that maybe their dad hired and kept around. Something's going to have to be changed, and there's got to be a drive and a force and an energy behind the next generation leader. Um, do you see companies coming to you that are family businesses where they just don't see that disruptor which I'm using in a positive sense, right? They don't see that next generation leader as really being able to take the reins, and they feel like it's a better move to sell the company, that extract more value, that they could help their child more out maybe later on because their child didn't run the business into the ground. Do you see that much?
Yeah. I have a number of situations I'm working on, including one of a business I'm selling right now, multiple kids in the business where the owners, it's usually a husband and wife, and in many cases thought that maybe their kids would come into the business and that would be their succession plan. And then not trying to influence it one or the other, the kids decided it's not for them. And then that is giving rise to them wanting to sell. And I think that's common. I don't find it common in situations, or I don't hear about many situations where, there's a kid in the business who isn't able. It's
Right.
usually like, it's a lot more in the situation where the kids just don't see themselves in the business at all.
Yeah.
And that's the rationale for selling.
Yeah.
So
I do see some of those come to me, and the parent will come to me and say, could you meet with my kid? I want to see if you could coach them up to becoming that person. And
yeah, that's hard.
I think it's really
It's a hard
hard.
dynamic.
It's a really hard dynamic. And I think, Greg, ultimately what it comes down to is like hunger and smarts. Do they have the hunger? Because if they can't engender that entrepreneurial drive within themselves, then they're probably not going to get there where where the founder or the current owner is. They're just not going to reach that place. And I think it's a really difficult place for the parent to be in, because they're trying to exit the business and also deal with a sensitive family dynamic where their kid might be out of a job at that point.
Yeah. And I do know the odd situation where I don't know that they've been clients, but where a business has been sold on that, and one of the one of the required sort of conditions of the deal is that you employ my son or daughter for the next 3 or 4 years or something like that, just to help that transition. And I don't think it ever goes well, but at least that person has a job in the business, and it becomes important for the selling family members. But
Right.
yeah. No, right. It is that's a very tough sort of situation, and because a lot of times too, the business is the retirement, the retirement fund of the founders, of the owners. So
yeah, interesting. All right, well, let's wrap this up with, tell us a little bit about your Lifetime at Work podcast. What's it all about?
Yeah, so I started the podcast called Lifetime at Work. It's all about interviewing different people about their jobs and the work that they do, the fulfillment they get out of it. And I really started the podcast as somewhat of a hobby as I was going through this, as I mentioned before, deciding on that corporate thing, whether I go, what I do, what do I do? Do I start a business? If I'm going to do that, what is the business? And kind of all those things that you're trying to figure out when you're, I don't know, either you're in your early 20s or you're in your 30s and you've worked for a while and you're trying to figure out, do I change everything or not? And so that's kind of the conversation I'm trying to have, because, my perspective is just that it's hard. It's hard to do it. It's hard to just move on a dime and make these types of really big decisions, and that any perspective is additional perspective is probably good. So, that's kind of the idea of the podcast, is just to talk about our work, why we do it, the fulfillment we get, the choices we've made. And
The modern day Studs Terkel was an author. I don't know if you know that name, but
no.
Oh yeah. So a book that I read growing up called Working. He wrote Working People Talk. I'm looking at hard times. He was a guy who went and interviewed people in all different careers about what their work was like and what their job was like. And I thought it was a very important book to me as I was 18, 19, 20, 21, somewhere in that era, where you're starting to think about, what do I want to do with my life? And this was a book, it probably covered a lot of working class people and their jobs and what their jobs look like. And I would call it a sort of a sociological approach to people's lives, but super interesting. Sounds like
you got to learn somehow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? So
fabulous. All right, Greg, it's been great having you on the show. Your investment bank is called
Origin Merchant Partners.
Origin Merchant Partners. And do you mostly work with companies in Toronto? Or are you working with companies all over the country, the world?
Yeah, we've got a Chicago
Canada.
office as well. We're fairly industrials focused down there. But yeah, we're with our food practice. Honestly, we're pretty across North America. But yeah, based in Toronto, and a lot of times our clients or our deals have a slight Canadian tinge to it, but not all the time.
Yep, sounds great. Hey, it's been great having you on the show. I've enjoyed talking with you. I hope that what you've shared is food for thought. No pun intended, for the listeners. And anything you'd like to close out with?
No, and if you're interested in the podcast, it's you'll find it on various platforms, and it's lifetimeatwork.com. And that's it. So
that's great.
Thanks a lot for having me on the podcast.
All right. And thanks for listening to the Disruptive Successor Show, folks.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.